all refreshed, I hope. Move to item number 17. Financial Strategy 2015-16 and 2016-17. Report by Gary Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. This report was touched on earlier in the report by Grant Thornton as one of the actions. I suppose having completed the 14-15 revenue budget, I'm now asking Council to immediately turn your attention to the financial strategy for the following 2 financial years. The development of this strategy is set in the context of the wider public sector financial outlook, where really councils now face repositioning themselves to secure financial sustainability in the longer term. I've set out in section 2 of the report on page 120 the cost of providing services is predicted to grow from around £189 million to over £202 million by 2016-17. And over the same period, income from Scottish Government grant and income from council tax together is predicted to fall, giving rise to a predicted budget gap over that period of nearly £13 million, or approximately 6% of expenditure. Tables 2 and 3 on page 121 summarise the factors that give rise to this predicted shortfall, and section 4 of the report on page 121-22 highlights the element of the budget that's fixed, whether because of the requirement to maintain teacher numbers or because of historic spending decisions around capital investment, whether through traditional means or PPP. So that means that the £12.7 million really equates to about a 17% reduction across the rest of the budget heads for Council. So the budget strategy that we've developed not only focuses on addressing that shortfall, but also to provide a means to prioritise the remaining expenditure and available resources to deliver on the community planning partnership priorities that we're all familiar with. So firstly, turning to the element to address the budget shortfall and secure financial sustainability, we're going to have to achieve efficiencies in service provision. Council is going to have to invest in service initiatives, as we've been doing in areas like children and families, and really to avoid higher costs in the future for services. And there's going to be a need for retrenchment, reducing the Council's role in terms of the services it provides and who it provides them to across the county. Sections 5.2 of the report through to 5.8 set out the key elements of the financial strategy that are aimed at securing financial stability. These include continuation of the Council's transformation programme, a workforce strategy and a review of staffing establishments across all of the new services, a review of the local government staff pay arrangements, effective asset management across all asset types, managing our borrowing costs through the adoption of the capital investment strategy, which is also on today's agenda, further service reviews, and the necessary setting of efficiency targets for services. The current targets for these work streams are predicted to reduce the budget shortfall from £12.7 million to around £3.2 million. The strategy and its impact on the budget will be continually reviewed, and I'll bring forward regular updates to members, probably with the next one either May or into June Council, when we have further progress on the various strands. As I touched on earlier, despite the financial outlook, we'll have in the region of £189 million to spend on services in the county. And section 7 of the report provides an update on the work that's ongoing through the community planning partnership to ensure that those resources are focused as far as possible on the delivery of improved outcomes for early years, positive destinations and economic growth. And again, that's a part of the strategy that we'll continue to develop in conjunction with the community planning partners. Turning now to reserves, these have a critical role in securing financial stability, and section 8 of the report sets out the current position with our reserves and recommends utilisation of those reserves that are held in the capital fund Firstly, to transfer resources to general fund to offset debt repayments and therefore increase the value of the general fund, and also to utilise the capital fund to support some of the costs associated with the replacement in Newbattle High School. As part of that strategy, I'm proposing that we increase the level of unallocated general fund reserve from the traditional 2% or £4 million that we've had to 4% of net expenditure, which is in the region of £8 million. And that's really in recognition of where the Council and where public sector finance is at the moment, and the increased period of risk that we face, increased period of risk and uncertainty. The financial strategy itself has been developed taking cognizance of the risks that are set out in section 9.2 of the report. I suppose all that I would be able to say with certainty is that the projections in the report will change, and that will bring forward regular updates to keep members fully briefed on what the projections in terms of our budget are, and what the latest projections are, and those measures that we're taking to address the challenges. Provost, I've run through the report quite quickly. I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I would point members to the recommendations which are set on page 132 of the agenda for your consideration. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be brief because it might be more useful if I'm able to respond to any other comments that other members might have. Clearly, there's a lot of work being put into the financial strategy here, and it's absolutely critical that we do have this strategy and move it forward. There's no hiding, and we've all known for a long time it's a difficult period that we have in public sector finance, and this Council is no exception to that. I think what you have here is a very detailed and very clear outline of what steps we can take to address that challenge, and the fact that we're able to target and look at a position next year of a small surplus, well, a £500,000 surplus, from what had been a £4 million gap, is very encouraging. And albeit there's still work to do for the 16-17 budget with £3 million left, £3 million is a whole lot easier to find than 12. I think the work that's gone in here really sets us a pace, and we come back to pace, as we heard at the report from external auditors this morning. We need to ensure that we're moving forward with the various aspects of the programme here. And again, I would come back to the point, when you look at the table 6 on page 126, just what percentage of the contribution to the total programme here is contributed by the Business Transformation Programme. I would again stress the importance of participation on that in delivering the savings that we need to address the challenges faced by the Council. Because if we can identify ways of working differently and transforming services, delivering the funding in this way is far, far more acceptable and far more straightforward than if we have to start looking at direct cuts to services. So the more that we can deliver through transformation, the easier, in fact, and I'm not saying these are going to be easy decisions, just that they'll be easier than some of the other decisions that we would have to make. There's good work starting in the community planning partners. We had a very useful session on sharing budgets just at the start of this year, where finance officers and senior members of majority of our partners came together to look at what budgets we have that are spent in Midlothian, not financial and non-financial. We're talking people as well as direct money, and how we can use these to be more effective in delivering the public sector services that our residents expect. So I think with that, Provost, again, I would move the recommendations in the report. Happy to take any questions of it, but can't understate just how important it is that we move forward in this strategy.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. With relation to the Council Transformation Programme, on page 133 in Appendix 1, under energy, it seems that this is restricted to energy savings. In the light of my budget proposals, which are presented to the previous meeting, I would like to ask the Leader of the Council if the administration would care to consider extending the scope of that to include energy generation, in terms of both possible wind power, which could be outside of Midlothian, not just inside, but also particularly introducing solar panels on some of our council buildings, particularly buildings which contain, say, swimming pools that have a lot of energy requirements. This would not only cut our costs, bring in much needed revenue, but also help to reduce our carbon emissions.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just to that, I think at the time of the last council meeting, I certainly agreed to accept, certainly to look at what we could do by way of energy generation and what income could we receive from that. And I think officers are, off the back of that, have already started to look at that. So certainly that is something that can be accounted for in the wider scheme.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, just a few comments, Provost. One, I think the general public out there will start to ask questions as to why we need an £8 million reserve. This council for many years has bounced along and went along with the prudent level being at £4 million, and there's nothing new coming round the corner. Cuts have been coming for a long time and been happening for a long time, and it just seems to me that we'll find it hard to explain to members of the public why we're sitting with £8 million, which is more than half the total cuts that we're looking to make. It seems a very big safety net. Again, even though Grant Thornton has just actually very publicly says that transferring funds for the capital fund over is something that he frowns upon, or they frown upon. Here we go again, taking almost £9 million out the capital fund, and if the figures are right, that'll leave a capital fund of around £3 million. That'll bring any work coming in this financial year to almost critical, and that's what you'll be faced with. I'm not sure if taking this kind of money out of your capital fund is the right way to do anything. I think we really need to get on and try to see where we can make savings and provide services a lot better and a lot more efficiently, rather than this. I think this is just simply a way of buying time. And there's also the use of £3 million there, which I think, while they call it transformation, it looks awful like the biggest bulk of that is going to be paid to fund the early and voluntary release scheme. And I just warn that we're then going to be in a stage where for the next financial year, the only work carried out to buildings or that are going to be critical work for us.
Councillor Thompson.
If I could maybe come in first and direct some of the more technical parts of that to Gary. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the strategy here is about getting ourselves ready for some of the challenge, and we need funding in place to facilitate some of the changes that we need to happen, such as the voluntary severance scheme Councillor Milligan refers to. I mean, I hear comments on the reserves. It wasn't that long ago that Councillor Milligan was saying we didn't have enough in reserves, so now we're putting in too much. We've clearly overdone it. But no, I think it is important and it is vital that we do have sufficient reserves to deal with any given situation that comes up, and so that we can react when we need to as part of an overall strategy. I think perhaps Gary's probably in a better place to comment on some of the more detailed points that were raised there, but I just wanted to make those points. Other than delivering services better and more efficiently, well, business transformation programme really is there to start looking at that sort of thing, and there's 2 places available to the Labour group on that if you want to take them up.
I suppose just add in terms of the general fund reserve, as we go, for me it's the commentary in section 2 of the report as we move into a period of increased cuts. You know, commentators say that there's more cuts to come through the public sector than we've had already. So it's a very uncertain time, significant risks, significant challenges ahead in transforming our services, pressure on costs, and therefore I think it's prudent to have a level of reserves that are there to deal with unforeseen circumstances. Those reserves are not there to fund ongoing revenue expenditure. They would be to fund one-off pressures or to fund one-off costs if and when they arise. And the same applies for the transfer of the capital fund. It's in 2 ways: £6 million to fund New Battle High School. That is why we would have a capital fund, to fund capital expenditure on our assets. And then that's a one-off cost. The £3 million transferred over to general fund to fund transformation, that will be again one-off cost to help transform the council. And yes, a significant proportion of that may well be spent on funding the voluntary severance early release programme that's further on in the agenda. But again, that's to release costs from the organisation to allow that transformation to happen and for us to then downsize our workforce. The justification for using the capital fund to fund New Battle is then to take pressure off. The alternative would be to borrow the money for the full council contribution to the high school. That would add further pressure to the revenue. So that's already provided for in the revenue budget, and therefore it eases the pressure on the revenue budget in later years.
Councillor Muirhead.
I'm intrigued at the, Gary, what you're saying about the reserves are there to fund revenue expenditure, that it's there for, one-off situations, one-off issues that might arise. What do you think is going to arise as a one-off issue that isn't just as likely to have happened in the past? I mean, a lot of the pressures that are coming on us I see as pressures on your revenue rather than capital, than one-off, Lugton Bray slipping down the hill kind of thing. What is it that we're looking to keep this money for one-off issues? What kind of issues are we talking about?
It's a combination of factors. We've had a very mild winter this year, but members will recollect in the past that when we've had significant numbers of days of snows, that has a significant financial impact on our budget and adds to further pressure. We've got a significant change programme. There may be risks associated with slippage in that programme. The budget projections that are before members today provide for 1% pay awards. There is a risk in later years that the settlements that are agreed, negotiations that are reached actually increase that. So we've got projections of a budget gap of £12.7 million. There are significant risks and uncertainties around that and what actually the position will be. And again, I come back because of the uncertainty in the public sector environment, the unprecedented level of change and the reductions that we will see flowing through over time. Having a healthy level of reserves would be prudent to give us maximum flexibility going forward to deal with the territory that we're going into.
Some of the examples you gave there, like the snow, there's no reason why it shouldn't be, inclement weather shouldn't be any worse in coming years. To justify, we're talking about a doubling of the reserves here. The wages issue, the potential of salary increases beyond what we would be expecting in our budget going forward, isn't it an issue of a one-off capital expenditure? It's an ongoing revenue commitment if there are wage increases in excess of what we're expecting. So, some of the things there you're giving me as examples, I didn't get why you're giving me them as examples, and certainly nothing like to justify a doubling of the reserves.
So I suppose just to further expand on the pay issue, we've got a budget strategy for 14-15, which assumes a 1% pay award for our staff. We will then work through over the next 12 months to develop as a management team proposals to address that budget gap, and that's outlined in the paper. If we get towards the end of that period and pay awards are settled at a higher level, then there's a risk, an increased risk in there. And if we haven't achieved the savings elsewhere in the budget to offset that, then there would be the potential to have the flexibility reserves to buy time in that respect.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. My answer to Councillor Muirhead's question, what's changed now really is business transformation. I would say that the big risks that we have at the moment that we've not had in the past are that business transformation slips. We also may need to invest more up front to get the benefits that we're looking for in the future. And I think it would be quite prudent to put more money in to business transformation, both as seed funding, if you like, to invest in the future, and also to give us that extra bit of comfort if some of the benefits don't come through quite so quickly as we thought.
Okay. Happy to move on now. Thank you. Item number 18, Financial Monitoring 2013-14 General Fund Revenue, report by Mr Fairley.
Promise, this is the third financial monitoring report for the financial year and provides Council with an update, projection of performance against the revenue budget and details of the material variances that are projected. The detailed budget performance by service is set out in Appendix 1 on page 140 of the agenda and shows a projected underspend at this point of £1.264 million or 0.6% of net expenditure. This is an improvement from the position reported back in November. Appendix 2 on pages 141 to 143 gives the material variances by individual services, and Section 2 of the report provides an update on the General Fund Reserve and highlights that the uncommitted reserve at this point is projected to be £7.598 million. Clearly, the decisions taken in the financial strategy report then change that level. In terms of risk, members, I should note the projections will undoubtedly change as the events unfold over the final couple of months of the year, and we'll bring back a final outturn report to Council once the accounts have been concluded in June 2014. Today, Council has asked just to simply note the report.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, clearly there's a lot of work been put in over the period, because we have seen improvement in the overspend but now underspend position. It's encouraging that we were able to work within services to manage that and to come out with a position today of an underspend of £1.264 million. I think with that, just note the report.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. It's just a question, really, just to clarify in my own mind. The more I try to understand the Council's accounts, the more I get confused. On page 138 at the top, and this refers, I understand, to the budget for 2013 to 14. It's got planned movement in reserves, which amount to £1.25 million. But on 2 pages ahead, on 140, under revised budget for 2013-14, it's got utilisation of reserves, the very last line. The budgeted amount is £6.5 million. Now, my understanding is they should be the same. What am I missing?
The appendix on the appendix in the comparison page with the report on page 138 reflects the earmarked reserves which were set aside. So if Councillor Baxter recollects, within the financial arrangements we earmark and have a scheme of budget delegation which allows services to carry forward budgets. So those together meant that the carry forwards from last year and the reserves that were earmarked to be utilised in 2013 were £5.7 million. That and the planned movements gives the outturn figure of reserves shown in the appendix, subject to some offsetting with other figures. I'm happy to come back on the detail of that and talk you through it individually if that would be of assistance.
Yes. It's, the thing that really confuses me is that under a revised budget, we've got utilisation of reserves, which looks like we've budgeted to use up £6.5 million of reserves, and I don't remember a meeting where we decided that.
Again, that's the budget will carry forward under the scheme of devolved budget management from last financial year to this financial year, and that would have been reported back in June 2013 as part of the final outturn report that we had on the 12-13 financial year.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 19, General Services Capital Plan 2013-14 Quarter 3 Monitoring. Report by Mr Fairlie.
Thanks, Provost. This report now provides an update on the year's General Services Capital Plan. As detailed in the appendix, expenditure to the 18th of December, if my memory serves me right, was £11.5 million, and we project expenditure by the year end to be just over £24 million. We're estimating a funding stream for this of £10.449 million, the majority of which comes from Scottish Government, and that will mean that to fund the capital plan this year we will be borrowing £13.584 million. Again, Council is asked to note the monitoring report.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. I think in this one there are one or two rephasings and slight changes to the overall budget, but no significant change from the last report we had, so I'd ask Council to note the report.
Happy to note. Thank you. Item number 20, General Services Capital Plan, Proposed Strategy, report by Mr Fairlie.
Thanks, Provost. This report complements the financial strategy earlier on today's agenda, and it proposes a strategy which would restrict the level of borrowing used to support the General Services Capital Plan and therefore maintain outstanding debt levels at the current levels. Proposes a level of annual investment for the replacing of upgrading of current assets, presents new projects that have been identified for approval, and updates members on the areas that are still to be developed and will require consideration for investment at a later date. So firstly, in terms of the level of borrowing to support capital investment, Section 2 of the report proposes to cap this at £114 million, with our annual borrowing in future years limited to no more than the annual debt repayments on the existing debt, plus the grant funding we receive from Scottish Government. There would be one exception to that, and that is the balance of funding that the Council will need to commit to the New Battle High School, £6 million of which would be funded based on the earlier decision of Council from the Capital Fund. Section 4 on pages 164 to 166 of the agenda sets out planned investment in the upgrading and essential replacements of existing assets. And the impact of this is set out in the Appendix 1 on page 170, and that sees proposals for members to invest £13.4 million over the period of 2017-18. Further capital investment pressures are inevitable, particularly around the Council's property estate, the review of ICT infrastructure and potentially the replacement of CCTV technology. Further proposals for investment on these will be brought forward to Council as they're further developed. As I said earlier, the implementation of the proposals in this report complement the financial strategy considered earlier. By reducing the outstanding debt, capping it at £114 million, it allows us to reduce the provision that was included in the revenue budget to meet borrowing costs, by 16-17 that reduces the budget gap by £1.227 million. So again, today, Provost, I'm asking Council to consider the detailed recommendations, and these are set out on page 169 of today's agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Clearly it's important as part of an overall strategy for our budgets we have a capital strategy as well. I think the key factor here is we're minimising the ongoing costs, and by introducing the budget cap we actually reduce what we actually have to pay annually going forward. So the less we have to borrow, the cheaper it becomes for us over time. It doesn't mean, we'll see in the recommendation H, obviously there can be new projects in, but we'd obviously need to give very, very close consideration to any new projects coming forward, because we do need to try and maintain our budget in line with maximising or minimising our ongoing future spends and looking at how we fund projects going forward.
Okay. Councillor Rosie.
just I agree what Councillor Thompson has said. It's good to see that we're, even in the challenging times, we're still able to invest in some of the general services and second what it's there.
Okay, thank you. Happy to note the report. Thank you. Item number 21, Housing Revenue Account and Capital Plan 2013-14. Report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. This financial report provides an update on the HRA account, both capital and revenue. Section 2.1 on page 165 highlights the projected overspend in the year of £401,000, and the principal variation arises from the need to increase the sum set aside for the recoverable rents, and that arises from the impact of welfare reform and under-occupancy charges. In terms of the capital plan, the projection indicates spend in the year of just over £16 million, and that's detailed on in Appendix 2 of the report. Again, today I'm asking Council to note the contents of the monitoring report.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Clearly this is a monitoring report, and obviously we're all very proud across the Council of the House Build programme we've got. I just wanted to take this opportunity to flag up the fact that we've actually been shortlisted as the Strategic Local Authority of the Year for our affordable housing investment programme. In fact, we're the only Scottish authority shortlisted for this, as it is a UK-wide award. So hopefully we will wish the team all the best for that when it's announced. The winner will be announced later in the year, but I think it's very, very encouraging that the work that's been done in Midlothian has been recognised by the industry and us being shortlisted for this award.
I'm sure we'll be happy to pay your train fare down to London to accept the award, Councillor Thompson. Accept the report. Thank you. Move to item number 22. Housing Revenue Account, Capital Plan 2014-15 to 2016-17 and Revenue Budget 2014-15 to 2015-16. Report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. The report provides an update to Council on future years' HRA Revenue Account and Capital Plans. The 14-15 through 16-17 investment plans are set out in the appendix and provide for capital investment of some £61 million. Work's ongoing to look at how best to prioritise that investment and what changes need to be made in terms of the investment plans, and it really picks up on some of the observations by members at the earlier council meetings about the investment in the infrastructure within housing estates, and a further report about incorporating that work will be brought forward to council in due course. In terms of the revenue account, after incorporating the impact of the ongoing investment, the agreed and proposed rent increases and increased provisions for the impact of welfare reform, the revenue projections are set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Today I'm asking Council to approve the outline revenue budgets and the capital plan.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Again, yeah, it's obviously a time of financial challenge. It is really encouraging to see such significant investment, the £36.5 million in Phase 2 of the new build housing programme and £24.5 million in the existing housing stock has certainly got to be welcomed. I think other than that, Professor, just move the report.
Thank you. Councillor Milligan.
Provost, I'll be brief. It was just to touch on about I had actually spoke to Gary prior to the council meeting to ask about where we were with the report on the infrastructure and some of your housing estates and council housing estates, and to see if there was a way in which we could, in such lean times where money is tight, look to utilise the HRA account to try and upgrade some of the areas. In fact, walking through some of the roads and pavements in Botherwell, mainly the pavements, they're in quite a deplorable state at times. Indeed, I'm walking through your own ward, Councillor Thompson, on Sunday going to the cabin. I can't mind the name of the street, but it runs parallel to the loan, because I'd taken the wrong turn, and the pavement in there is about disintegrating. So I think it's really imperative that we get a report back, hopefully for the next council, to see if there's ways that we can start investing. We have done well in a lot of areas in our houses, and that are some of the highest margins that you can get for socially rented housing, and I think now would be that time to start looking at the actual infrastructure, and the quicker we can get that report, it would be helpful.
Take that on board. Councillor Emery.
Yeah, just a question. Under approved expenditure, it says future works, 1.7 million this year, 4 million the next year, and 1 point the next year. What the heck does that mean?
My understanding is it's a whole raft of smaller projects within the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, and it would include things like rough casting repairs and upgrades, things like that. But I'm happy to work with my colleague Gary Sherritt and come back to members with detail.
Okay, happy with that. Item number 23. Treasury Management and Investment Strategy 2014-15 and Prudential Indicators. Report by Mr Fair.
Provost, alongside setting the revenue budget, I'm required to bring a report to Council to agree the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy, the Prudential Indicators and Treasury Indicators. The detailed strategy is set out in Appendix 3 of the report, and it complements both the financial and capital strategies and the revenue budget report that were considered earlier on this afternoon's agenda. Today I'm again asking Council to consider the recommendations which are set out page 187 of this report.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting again, we continue to have a very strong performance in terms of Treasury Management, which is can only be a good thing for us, especially when we are trying to minimise expenditure where we can. If we can do it in the amount we have to pay on our borrowing, surely that's got to be one of the easiest savings we can make. So I'd certainly welcome the report, and I'm sure if there are any technical questions on this, it can all be directed to Gary.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 24, Voluntary Severance and Early Retirement Policy and Scheme. Report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. This report moves away from a simply financial report and looks at issues relating to our workforce. It seeks Council approval for a new voluntary severance and early retirement policy and for the implementation of a time-limited voluntary severance and early release scheme for staff. Voluntary severance and early release has and will continue to be a legitimate means to effectively manage reductions in the staffing establishment. It complements the My Future programme and it continues to be an important element of the Council's workforce strategy. The policy that we've got in front of members today reflects recent Audit Scotland guidance and includes both a standard and enhanced scheme, both of which have two permanent elements. An increase in the payback period against which we would measure the business case for early release applications, and also an uplifting of the weekly wage that's used in the calculations. So for a severance payment for staff, the calculation's got three factors: the weekly wage, the length of service and the age of the individual, and using a lookup, those arrive at the severance payment a member of staff would receive. For members' information, the uplift to £450 per week means that staff, local government staff, and through our grades 1 to 5 would receive an uplift against what they would get just using their normally weekly wage. Sections 2.5 to 2.7 of the report summarise the standard and enhanced schemes, and I'm happy to answer any questions members may have on them. The proposal is to operate this enhanced scheme for a period of no more than 3 months, beginning in March 2014. Access to the enhanced terms would be available to all employees of the Council, but in recognition of the areas where we seek to make reductions in the workforce, the communications around the scheme would be targeted to those employees set out in sections 2.8 of the report. It's also proposed that we would offer enhanced terms to those employees who, through the repositioning and restructure of council services, find themselves in switch, and they would either receive the enhanced terms or a minimum severance payment based on 6 months' salary. Provost, today Council is asked to consider the recommendations which are set out on page F10 of the supplementary agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I think it's important we recognise that this voluntary severance scheme plays an important part of the overall strategy in transforming the services we offer as a council and how we operate. I think our people are clearly one of our most important assets as an authority, and we're doing what we can to support and help those who work for us through the introduction of the living wage and our no compulsory redundancy policy. I think in this terms, and we recognise that it can be challenging when there is a period of transformation, so actually having a voluntary severance scheme alongside that actually helps to support the mechanisms that we're using. So with that, and I don't think I need to say much more on that, I'd move the recommendations in the report.
Councillor Milligan.
Provost, I have some questions, and I think probably the big question here for everybody employed in this council, for all the people who've already went through service reviews, who've already went through reviews, all their services, mainly at the low paid, why now, why no back then? How's this suddenly coming forward just when the management review is starting to take place? I think one of my colleagues used the term, is this the bankers' bonuses now? Was it you? But quite frankly, on a serious note, why now? Why for a period of suddenly this short period of 2 months? We've already had 3 months, sorry. We've already had the janitorial reviews, we've had the waste reviews, we've had cleaning reviews, we've had leisure service reviews. All the reviews at the bottom end of the scale have taken place. Why now? Because this seems to me that the people most likely to benefit for this are the people who've actually written this paper.
Bringing the strategy forward to Council today really complements the financial strategy and where we are in terms of the reductions we have to make. Section 2.8 of the report highlights those staff that we would target the scheme to, and I would draw members' attention to the bullet points at the top of page F8. The biggest group of employees that will be within the targeted part of the scheme are those administrative and support staff and that job family. So that's our grade. The vast majority of those staff are on grade 2. So this scheme, the scheme and its targeted communications will focus on staff across the whole spectrum of the 14 grades. And it is open to all other employees across the council.
Councillor Thompson.
Just on that as well, I mean, I think that point also highlights on that at the top of page F8 there, the targeted area we're looking at is only 38 management included within the target pool of 1,243. And as Gary mentioned, it's grades 1 to 5 that will get the uplift when we start to apply the £450 weekly pay. So it's the lowest paid who actually will gain the most advantage from the enhanced scheme that we're proposing here.
Councillor Milligan.
The lowest paid in this group, and I think the lowest paid have already been through their reviews. It still doesn't answer the question. It's why is it coming in now? Where does your equality strategy lie now? That we're now bringing this in just as these reviews take place, and reviews, for example, of cleansing services, which are mostly female employees. Why wasn't it used in here? Why now? And I think we're going to have to be specific as to that reasoning, because I'm going to be honest with you here. This seems to me that a worst case scenario, what we could have is somebody very high up the tree walking out here with £100,000 in their back pocket and access immediately their pensions. And on this occasion, I'm not actually looking at the administration to actually criticise on this. I think that the management team need to take some responsibility for this. If you thought that this was necessary, it should have been brought in right at the start of these reviews, and not just as the senior management team were getting put in it.
Just to clarify, the position for staff who might leave the organisation and would access their pension was they would get their retirement lump sum and annual pension. The policy as written has a restriction on the severance payment they would get, so that would be a maximum of 66 weeks at £450, so significantly less than the figures that Councillor Milligan quoted for those that are access to their pension. I suppose we are where we are. In preparing the financial strategy and looking at the challenges ahead, as a management team we felt now was the right time to further incentivise staff to leave the organisation. One thing is clear through the financial strategy and the work that's going on, that we will have to have less employees. We've got low turnover across our staffing levels. We've got no age retirement, so staff do not have to leave as they did a number of years ago at the age of 65. They can stay for as long as they feel able to do the job. And therefore, I see that the voluntary severance early release package and the enhanced terms, which have been benchmarked against other councils and are not excessive compared with other councils, represent a legitimate means to help manage our workforce.
Councillor Emery.
Thanks, Provost. Gary, you mentioned earlier in your financial strategy when you set it out, and the council leader spoke to that, about the need to keep the purse strings tight. Now, when we looked at an enhanced voluntary package before, we were certainly told by the then Director of Finance that we should not be breaking the 3-year rule. In other words, you don't go for an early release scheme unless you can get your payback period within that 3 years, because it's all about balancing budgets and keeping the finances tight as you possibly can. What's changed in your thinking, bearing in mind you've just spoken to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 reports actually on finance, and the council leader has endorsed these reports, and so has the council for that matter. But what I can't understand is how all of a sudden you feel relaxed about increasing it to a 5-year payback term as opposed to 3, when you're taking money, for example, out of the capital budget at the moment to put into new battle because of the interest rate, etc., that you're paying on that particular money instead of borrowing, whereas that's going to take a 5-year period to pay back and make the thing balance the book, so to speak. I just wondered what changed.
I suppose it's really the financial environment that we're in and the extent to which we need to make savings. As we move into 16-17, the budget assumptions that members have agreed in previous budget reports will see for the first time a reduction in the cash grant that we get from Scottish Government. So I do see that the climate that we're moving into is more challenging than that we've ever had before. The current schemes that we've operated, I would look to sign off on early releases with no more than a 3-year payback period. Having benchmarked where we are against other councils, I feel that there is scope to increase that to 5 years, to allow greater flexibility, to allow to maximise the opportunity for us to be able to release staff. I would see that as long as we're getting that payback over a longer term, albeit 5 years instead of 3, that it still would provide a means to reduce our cost base. So I think 5 years is on balance appropriate. Means that on the longer term, as we move through the transformation programme and we face up to the reality of what local government funding might look like in 5 years' time, we'll be in a better place to have managed our workforce and our staffing levels down.
Councillor Pottinger.
I was just reading today about the Royal Bank of Scotland, and the Chief Executive, Ross McEwen, has revealed that he will not be taking his bonus this year, but neither will any of his Executive Committee members be taking a bonus from the Royal Bank of Scotland. And it's based on the pending debt situations within the Royal Bank of Scotland. We keep hearing about difficult times here in Midlothian, You know, we've got a lot of financial difficulties. We've got pending debt, things that we're doing our best to resolve. Now we're burdened, you know, or potentially burdened with an enhanced severance payment to this council. You can talk about payback times and everything else, but my question basically was on your words. We need to further incentivise staff. Now, we're aware of the Switch programme, we're aware of the My Futures stuff, we're aware of all the events that's going on. So now what research has said that Midlothian needs to further incentivise staff to accept severance packages? What research have you got that says we need to further incentivise?
Yeah, we have the My Future programme and Switch programme, which are designed to help us match staff to the jobs that are available as we reduce the workforce in specific areas, but see increases in others. For example, increases in care. There inevitably will be further demands on those services. There are three elements. We have a no compulsory redundancy policy. We have low turnover, and that was, we've got that research, and we have the no age retirement policy. Now, I've taken legal advice as to whether we could implement a age retirement policy, and I mean that people would have to leave at a specific age, and the advice is that we can't do that. We don't have justification to do that. I have benchmarked the proposals in this report across that operated by the other 31 councils, a number of whom would operate schemes which are more beneficial to staff than what's proposed in this paper. We'd be one of the few councils through a policy that actually increased the weekly wage that's used in the severance payment for low-paid staff. We are, if not the only council, one of the few councils that would actually target our severance packages to further benefit staff in the lower grades. So that's a sort of summary of where the evidence base in terms of what others are doing and where we are, and the financial picture that we face that means that we do need to reduce our workforce. And severance, voluntary severance and early retirement is a legitimate means to continue to do that.
Basically, you've answered my question. We're aware that many staff have been through review procedures. Many staff have went into Switch. We're aware that many staff have got no compulsory policy. We're aware that other local authorities are doing other things. But this has now come to this council now, right, on reasoning, and direction from yourself, and obviously the affordability question that is up for scrutiny. Can we afford this? And the other thing is it appropriate? We need to know more information about what research you've done, and you may have had some chat with some senior officers, that who are contemplating the future, but that's no research. The research is for all. I mean, if people went out before on the current severance package, why are they not likely to go out now on the current severance package? What evidence can you give me to research to say that Midlothian Council needs to enhance its severance package?
The evidence I would use is, I would refer back to the financial strategy. £13.7 million saving out our budget equates to 17% over those service areas that we can influence, and 60% of our expenditure on staffing. So, we need to reduce our staffing numbers. The scheme that we're adopting is a scheme that was provided for in our discretionary pension regulations that were agreed by Cabinet back in 2007, if my memory serves me right. So it's a scheme that we have operated in the past. It doesn't go beyond what was there in the previous decade. And we're proposing only to have that within the policy as an enhanced scheme, and to switch it on and off as we see fit. So I suppose the proof will be once we've gone through a time-limited period to see how many applications we've had, and whether that's successful in reducing the workforce to the levels that we feel necessary.
Councillor Muirhead.
I suspect if we had been discussing this issue a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have had this level of discussion. I think the position that I think your group's going to take here would probably have been different. What we've been talking about is the timing of this and why it's being brought forward at this particular time. To me, it's an issue of fairness in terms of how we treat our workforce. And why now are we coming in with this? Now, Gary, you've just justified that on the basis of the financial situation that we've just been talking about, the £13 million odd pounds that shortfall that we're going to face in the coming year or two. A couple of years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, were we not talking about £19 million at that time? You know, we were talking about significantly more than we've ended up at now. Why was that no a consideration at that point, when the outlook looked even bleaker then than it does at this point? We didn't turn round and say then that we were going to put the enhanced redundancy payments in. So what you've just said there is not a justification. The current financial situation looks slightly better than it was 3 years ago. So I just don't get that. It is about timing, and I think it's totally unfair to the people who have gone for the council before, who have probably have signed on the dotted line in the last few days in terms of cleaning staff and things like that, that on the basis of the payment scheme that currently exists, that's now going to change. I don't see the need in terms of timing, in terms of the financial position of the council, to be introducing this now.
I suppose to come back, there is we've made the decision to bring this forward to council today to bring the enhanced terms, and yes, there will always be people who, prior to this being agreed, received a lower package. Again, I come back. Yes, we've had cuts over a number of years, but as I highlighted in the financial strategy paper, that the position going forward becomes even more challenging. Yes, £13 million, but that's after having taken £4 million out of the budget that we've just been agreed for next year, having taken X number of £1 million out the year before. So the extent to which we can make efficiencies, the extent to which we can take resources out of the budget without reducing our staffing establishment becomes increasingly challenging. And it's against that backdrop of having to quickly and effectively reduce our staffing establishment that I feel having a clear policy is appropriate, and having the enhanced scheme available to turn on at specific times and turn back off again, to have that within the policy is appropriate to give flexibility, and to turn it on at this point to reduce the workforce in the short term is appropriate as well.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think also, we're trying to maximise. It's a range of tools that are being looked at here, a range of options that all contribute towards the overall financial strategy. There's massive amounts of transformation happening within the council, and we need a mechanism that helps us to support the movement that we need to move some of the changes that we need to see happening. We have staffing, and the wage bill is a significant part of the expenditure of the council. We see that in the fixed cost report that Gary presented earlier. So from that point of view, I'm going to move. I have already moved, but again, move the recommendations in the report that we move on with this, because I think that we need to be making this movement now. We need to be making the changes now, because we need to be getting ourselves in line to address the challenges that are coming, and to move through the transformation work that we need to do, and that does require the staff turnover that Gary talks about, and that for that reason I'm keen to move forward. I think we have had a good discussion in this. Obviously, there's been a lot of questions on it, but I think we now need to move on. This needs to be part of the strategy that we take forward in driving forward the change that the council needs.
Councillor Constable.
I'd just like to second on this. There will never be a time to bring in a scheme like this, which is going to be, when it comes in, people who have gone before will feel its advantage. If we postpone it to another year, I don't see any advantage in that, so I just propose to second one just now.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, I would just like the dissent of the Labour group to be noted with this. I think it's a bad day in this day and age when some of your highest paid staff are going to need security court to let them go home.
Okay, we note your dissent and we move on to item 20. Item number 25, financial comparison of school projects delivered in the last 10 years. Report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. This report sets out a comprehensive analysis and comparison of the costs of school replacement and improvement in the last 10 years. It's a very factual report and it was requested to come to count. The report itself was requested originally by the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee in September 2003 and was presented to that committee for discussion on the 21st of January. Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee requested some additional information to be incorporated in the report and it then be presented to Council today for further consideration. As I say, it's a factual report, a lot of detail in it. I'm happy to pause at this point and myself, or hopefully behind me my colleague Gary Thompson, can answer any questions that members may have. Otherwise, Council is simply today asked to note the contents of the report.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, it's full of a lot of statistics and figures. What was it Churchill said? There's all sorts of things, a white lie, a damned lie, and a statistic. So goodness knows you can present these in all sorts of different ways to back up arguments in any different way. First of all, looking at it financially, the cost to the public purse. I would refer you to Table 3.7 on page 254. Being a simple soul, I'll go straight to the figures. And in line 28, we see that the PPPs is more expensive there. It's not the horror stories that you get from private partnership operations in the Skye Bridge, where 93 million was eventually paid for a £15 million bridge. Or in the Royal Infirmary, the parking charges are higher than that at the airport. The private sector will always want its pound of flesh when it's involved in public things. However, these figures speak for themselves, but of course don't represent the cost of the Council, which the Labour administration at Holyrood agreed to meet some of the ongoing charges over the 30-year period of the contract. In a different format, of course, the Scottish Government, through the Scottish Futures Trust, paid for Lastwaite High School, and we paid for the community aspect of it. So it's different funding for different things. The New Battle High School is a hybrid of the two funding methods, in my opinion, with Hubco providing private finance. This really sort of forced, well, I think it's forced on us by Westminster imposed restrictions on the Scottish Government. So it's not so good. However, to move to the second aspect I want to talk about is the community aspect of it. And this is the part that really interests me more, that where the school is not under the control of an outside contractor, we get far more community involvement in, where Midlothian staff operate and control the facilities. And this will happen at New Battle, I'm very pleased to say. The contrast between the community's take-up and, inverted commas, ownership of that can be very marked between Lastwaite High, let's say, Lastwaite Centre and the Dalkeith campus. I remember during the New Battle debate back in last June, members referred sometime how poor the community involvement was in the Dalkeith campus and is used as an argument against the New Battle Centre. At that time, I regretted we were making that decision before the opening of Lastwaite. It was actually just a week or two before the opening of Lastwaite. And we're all, the whole council, we've been overwhelmed by how successful and popular the Lastwaite Centre has improved. It's just jammed. Just only last week, Councillor Thompson and I, at a meeting in there, were pleased to see even our dear Head of Finance using the exercise equipment. Very much a case of men sana in corpore sano, I hope. So I'm sure other members will have a lot to comment on this, but I would just like to move that we note the report.
Councillor Muirhead.
It's interesting to hear Councillor Constable referring to this report as statistics, and statistics can be made to say anything. These are only statistics. This is a clinical analysis of the situation with regards to the different methods of procuring the schools in Midlothian over the last 10 years. It's not statistics, and the findings are quite stark, and I'm not surprised there's an attempt by Councillor Constable to divert it away, talking about it being statistics. He also mentions the horror stories that can appear regarding PPP projects. The horror stories about the PPP projects, in particular our PPP projects, were coming from that side of the table. You know, Colin Beattie took great pains during the time he was here to criticise the PPP, as did the other members present. PPP was the worst thing since sliced bread. I can recall the PPP being blamed for the current financial situation we were in, with certain individuals, not necessarily a member of the group, but the members of your group, but your bedfellows described it as being the sort of thing that will sink the council, and you know that this is an absolute disaster. The PPP, the fact that we had committed ourselves to this project, these projects that will bankrupt the council. This information that's before us today shows that that is total nonsense. And I think, you know, we said at the time when we were discussing the PPP projects, going right back to 2002 when I started on the council, we were prepared to actually say in public that we were not that enamoured with the PPP, but it was the only game in town. And what you can see for the information that's presented to us here today is that we got a good deal from Midlothian Council. Midlothian Council comes out better in the PPP projects than it does in the New Battle project. And that's no disputable. I'd like to thank the staff for having prepared this report, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's very easy to turn around and talk about the £100 million that this 30 or £40 million school is going to cost us in the long term. That's equivalent to a mortgage. That's what you have to do sometimes. It's very easy to bandy the kind of figures around. This is much more difficult to get your head around. I have to say, I read this about 5 times before I managed to get my head around it. But because I wanted to make sure that I understood the build-up to the point where you're comparing apples with apples. And that is precisely what we're doing here. What it clearly indicates that the right page, that the annual cost per square metre to the council for the Dalkeith campus project is significantly lower than the Last Wage Centre and the New Battle projects. It's key. These are the key findings of this assessment, this analysis that's been done here. The annual cost per square metre to the council for the New Battle project is higher than the Last Wage project. You know, now the previous Labour administration were under constant criticism, and that's why I asked for this the performance review, because I got fed up with this kind of misinformation being put around, and it's shown quite clearly here that, as I say, the situation or the contracts that we entered into were the right ones at the time for the council. We were prepared to say that we didn't like the PPP, which is more than I'd like to hear what the SNP group's analysis is or position is in terms of what they think the current contract for New Battle, what position that is going to leave us in terms of value for money for the people in Midlothian. I know that the Councillor De Vink's been very consistent on this, and his view, I think, is probably more in line with mine on this. But I think we've got to no lose focus on why we did what we did here. We were sitting in the situation when I was elected in 2003. I paid a visit to the Gorbridge Primary School. And literally the week before, the ceiling had fallen down when the kids slammed the door to come out of the assembly room. I got shown around the school, which hadn't changed much since I was at it. It's the first time I'd been in it, I think, since I left it in 1970. But, you know, there was real need to do that at the time. And we would certainly make no apologies for going into the deals that we did, because it meant, at the end of the day, that 50% of the schools in Midlothian are either replaced, have been replaced, or have been refurbished. That wouldn't have happened without PPP, and it was a good deal for the people in Midlothian. And it looks, according to the papers that we have before us today, that it was a better deal than the one that the current administration have signed up for in terms of New Battle.
Councillor Thompson.
Where I would agree is I think it is an excellent report, and I think it's very, very useful to have the level of detail that's included in here. What I would say is to maybe put a bit of caution onto the comparison in the square meterage, because it's a simple measure here. It doesn't take account of the distinction between school facility, leisure facility, and it's a simple absolute on size of total facility to cost. So from that point of view, it's actually not quite comparing apples to apples. That being said, I'd make the point. I mean, I think what does come out of this is that clearly that on cost terms there's not a lot of difference between the New Battle School project and the Dalkeith campus PPP. I think that's absolutely clear. No make any secret of that. I think obviously it is the big advantage we get from the New Battle is the access to it. We have the control of the facility as we operate it over the years and so on. But I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not the case. It is. We see the numbers that are there. The cost terms are broadly similar for the New Battle project to the Dalkeith campus. There's no hiding for that. I think the biggest difference is the access we have and the availability we have to use the facilities to their maximum potential. We can see at Last Wade just how popular that is and how much it's used. I would love it if the Dalkeith campus could be like that. And certainly with New Battle we've got the chance to do that. If there's something we can do at Dalkeith to make it that, it's not been up till now, and I would argue that was largely down to how the contracts were, not from anyone within this council, but how the wider scale of those contracts were drawn up. And yes, it is absolutely the fact that the funding support on the PPPs is 100% on the capital build and the lifestyle maintenance, certainly for the high school campus, 80% for the PPP primary schools. I think, again, there's no hiding from that. I think, again, it was a different financial climate when we were able to get 100% and 80%, but overall costs to the public purse are still broadly in line then to now on the two projects. I think the one thing that does come out to me in all of this is that the ideal way to build the schools, and I think we would all agree on this, is how we've done it with Last Wade. A sort of traditional capital build project. I don't think there'll be much disagreement, I would hope there's not much disagreement in the Chamber on that. So yeah, I think it was a fascinating report. I think it was very, very useful for us to have it and to get into that level of detail. It lets us learn lessons, it lets us see where we need to go down the line, what advantages we can gain and how we can do it, and hopefully there is something we can do to perhaps improve the access at the campus so that it can be brought into line with the massive benefit we get from having that access at Last Wade and the massive benefits that we will have, or will be able to have for New Battles built.
Councillor Drink.
Could Councillor Muirhead explain why those banks that originally initiated the PPPs sold on those contracts at a absolutely vast profit?
Well, the short answer to that is no. I'm not here to justify PPP. What I'm here to justify is us taking advantage of it. I'm not saying it was the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not saying it's the absolute right way to go. I would tend to agree with the comments that Councillor Thompson's just made, that the best way to have built them is built their schools would have been the Last Week model. However, it wasn't available. I'm no an apologist for PPP. I think there are issues with PPP, and I've experienced them in my own area, that would have been less the case if we had total control of the school facilities. But as far as what you've accused us of, Councillor De Vink, is about wasting public finance, I totally refute that, and I think that this document proves it.
Councillor Montgomery.
Thanks, Provost. I'm not going to reiterate what's already been said, but I mean, I think if you go back to when the previous administration, and I think it was 14 schools that we built, if I can remember correctly, 2 high schools and 12 primary schools. We built 5 the traditional method, which was really kind of council funding, which is the right way to do it, there's no question about that. But the problem I had was that the school estate that was actually starting to fall apart, and the only way that we could actually fund I think it was 6 primary schools, was by the private finance initiatives, which, as I say, we actually criticised at the time, very much against the Labour Scottish Executive at the time. They weren't very pleased with us, but we did actually criticise them for it. We felt we should be given the finance to do them in traditional methods. But if you actually look at the Dalkeith campus, we actually built 3 schools there, no 1. And the highest cost school that would be built in any of these 14 schools that would be built, and if you take the 2 that are built now, the highest specification was Saltersgate, and that's actually included in the Dalkeith Schools campus, and it's still coming out well below the 2 that have been built now. Now, the special needs school, the level of specification, as I say, that would be needed for the youngsters who have got disabilities is far, far higher than any of the other schools. And if you can include that into what we've actually done, I think, as Jim said, I don't think we've got a bad deal. It's not the best deal we could have got because it was the only thing we could do. But if you actually take that into account, it's an even better deal than what we actually got in relation to 2 schools that have just been done.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I wonder if the answer to Councillor De Vink's question is that the banks were subsidised by the Scottish taxpayer, not by the Midlothian taxpayer. Because looking at some of these figures, it looks like the extra costs of PPP actually came from the subsidies from Scottish Executive, Scottish Government, what you will. In which case, I'm actually quite pleased that what this report has said to me is that councillors whose sole responsibility is to the council taxpayer in Midlothian did not make a big mistake, as I think was the original allegation. But I think the Scottish taxpayers may have made a big mistake in having a government which made decisions which were not in their interests.
Okay. Right. Up to say that the schools should never have been fallen down in the first place. I mean, Labour were in power for 84 years before we came along. So anyway, the report says what it says, and I think we can all take something out of them. Okay, move along. Item number 26, Single Fraud Investigation Service, Impact on Local Authority Fraud Investigations. Report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. And you'll be glad this is the last report I have on today's agenda. It updates members on the proposals by the Department of Work and Pensions to form a National Single Fraud Investigation Service and the impact that may have locally on our services. Section 2 of the report sets out the background to the changes and what that impact is likely to be locally. It highlights the impact on our staff, on the future provision of fraud investigation services and the prevention locally of fraud and the risk, I suppose, around local intelligence in terms of our staff knowing the community, etc. That risk manifests itself in section 3.2 where we highlight the responsibility, I suppose, it sits on me as statutory in Section 95 officer to effectively put in place measures to effectively prevent fraud and corruption and the dilution of our service by moving to a national service focusing on benefits will have an impact on that. What we'll be doing is, as we go through that change process and as we go through the review of the Finance and Integrated Service Support Service, we'll look at how to effectively ensure that we have local services to prevent and detect fraud, not just within benefits, but across a range of the services that the Council provide. Today I'm simply asking members to note the current position and that we'll bring forward further updates in due course as the Single Fraud Investigation Service progresses. Thank you.
Councillor Bryant.
I just want to simply state that it's another element of the Whitehall welfare reform agenda, and the centralisation can only detract from the current locally based service and our staff, who are now going to be chasing around getting reports for people in Whitehall. I don't know what else to say.
Okay, do accept the recommendations of the report. Thank you. Item number 27, Positive Destination for School Leavers. A report by Kenneth Lawley, the Chief Executive. Welcome.
Thank you, Provost. The aim of this report is to inform Council of progress on one of the three key priorities which the Council and indeed the Community Planning Partnership have agreed. And in terms of performance, Midlothian has improved its performance on positive destinations in the latest statistics by 3.8%, achieving a figure of 89.2, and that is there's a pattern of improvement over quite a number of years, and that in itself is very positive. But the point that I make in section 3 is, despite that improvement, we still rank 30th out of 32 councils. The difference that has been made really is that whilst once we were well adrift, really of nearly all other councils in Scotland, we are now in the pack, but we still have more work to do to achieve a level which I think we'll all regard as acceptable. In paragraph 3, it refers to further detail in Appendix 1, and I think members will have noticed that there isn't, in fact, an appendix to this report, so I do apologise for that. We will circulate that additional information. Really, the key issue that emerges here is that whilst in Midlothian we're achieving good results in terms of young people accessing employment or training or activity agreements or indeed volunteering, it's in terms of access to further and higher education that we still lag behind other areas, and thus the point made in that paragraph that we need to continue to focus on the issue of educational attainment, as indeed a point was made by our external auditor earlier in the meeting. When we last reported to the Council in June, we proposed a series of actions, both short and medium term. The body of the report sets out the progress against these actions, and today the Council is asked to note the progress that has been made in terms of positive destinations, and in that I think the Council also needs to note that there is more to be done.
Thank you. Bob Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, welcome the improvements, and note that, well, the statistics in there, but they are showing that we are improving, and we are, as Kenneth said, well up in there, and a small improvement will bring us well up the figure from 30 to higher up. The thing that strikes me now in my new portfolio is paragraph, third paragraph in point 3 on performance and the need to raise educational attainment. And to this, in fact, I'd like to just announce and seek Council approval for the setting up of an education committee to deal with educational matters. This would be a research process. I've met with the Director and the Head of Service to see what is happening in other parts of the country, what kind of education committees, where some councils have them, what are the voting rights on, what are the compositions on them. And so it's an exploratory process just now, and I would seek Council approval to carry on with that. I'm also looking at, of course, the history of when we did have an education committee in Midlothian, which maybe some of the longer-term members might be able to help me with. So that's it. And I intend to come back to Council later on in the year when I've formulated more proposals on that matter, and we seek to meet with the opposition as well in forming an education committee. Thank you.
Councillor Muirhead.
I welcome the fact that we are progressing, and as the Chief Executive said, while we're still doing it 30th, we're getting closer to the ones that, sorry? 30th, it says there. Anyway, so I welcome that. One of the things, though, that I can't quite get out of this report, I do see that we are higher than average in regards to employment and training and things like that. In the report, it talks about taking, studying the situation that pupils that are leaving find themselves in over a period of time. It's something I've raised before about how far forward do we take that, because positive destinations, a lot of the measures that we're taking here are aimed at dealing with the youngsters as they're leaving the school and what happens to them at that point. The interest I've got is what happens to them beyond that point. Now, we can put together, destinations for them that make them look like they're positive destinations. It's how far they get with that in that direction, if you like. These additional kind of interviews that take place, do they manage to catch the situation that people are in once they've gone through that initial placement that they've been in? If they go on a training course or some of the things that we're talking about here, What happens at the end of that? Do we have that kind of information yet? Are we collecting that level of information to see what's happened to them after that initial place that they go to positively?
SDS collates all the initial information for youngsters when they first leave school. So they look at a point when they leave school, and then it's 6 months later. I'm just looking to Andrew just to confirm that. So they collate that information. In terms of youngsters when they've been on a placement with us, we would then track that through. So we're doing a bit of a two-pronged action just now. We're tracking back to see why we have youngsters who are not in positive destinations. So we're looking at things like, what was their attendance like? When did that start to drop? Have we picked it up early enough? So what are we doing at that point? Then we have locality forums, identifying these youngsters prior to leaving school and saying what supports can be put in place. And that's when we come together as a council, saying, you know, what opportunities have we got for these youngsters, both within the council and with external people. And then it goes on to the work that Alistair Mather's team does in terms of Midlothian training services that works with young people as well. So there's a lot of tracking goes on with our young people, both when they immediately leave school and when they go on to our training programmes. But beyond that, I'm not really sure where the tracking would be.
Councillor Coventry.
Yeah. Just to clarify, the official school leaving date is May the 31st, and in September, for the full month of September, there's follow-up done. It's a snapshot of where the young people are. There's then another snapshot taken in March. Those young people who are in negative destinations are followed up, as the officer has explained, by different agencies, including, for example, Skills Development Scotland. So, in a sense, we're on their case to ensure that, they're being offered support and help to move into a positive destination. So I hope that clarifies a few of the points. Can I just go on to say a couple of other points? I just wanted to welcome the progress that has been made in moving young people in Midlothian into positive destinations, and while there is still work to be done, it's heartening to see that we, as a council, are moving in the right direction as regards positive destinations for school leavers. This reflects the hard work carried out by the council, particularly the activity workers, schools, guidance staff, all working in partnership with Skills Development Scotland. I also welcome the apprenticeships offered by Midlothian Council, as well as the increased links with local colleges mentioned on page 292, particularly Borders College, with the intention of improving access for Midlothian residents to Borders College, which after all is just down the road really. The increased use of sector academies, as well as the excellent paid training opportunities for school leavers through Employability Fund, Mary just mentioned MTS, there's paid training which can last up to 26 weeks for young people, and it's known as Employability Fund, which often includes a work placement. Volunteering opportunities are all routes into employment, offering young people increased confidence and experience as well as qualifications. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that while many young people struggle in school once they move into a new environment, i.e. college, training, employment or volunteering, they often thrive in that new environment. However, we have to keep working hard to ensure that our young people are given every opportunity, along with the self-confidence to fulfil their potential.
Mr. Bourne.
Thank you, Provost. I would echo the very encouraging comments made by our Councillor Coventry and would agree with all of them. I also welcome this paper from the Chief Executive. I think it's a very nuts and bolts paper and shows that there's a lot of actual things happening. Sometimes you can read a paper and it's, I won't use the word woolly, but you know what I mean. With this one, there's a lot of practical things happening. The key players in this are the teachers. I remember when I came to Midlothian in the mid-70s, someone took me aside and said, the biggest challenge we face is getting our youngsters to have aspirations. And this is where I have always felt the whole higher education issue and further education issue comes in, is raising these aspirations. And that can only be done through the teachers doing this. Now, I have heard from teachers that this is actually happening in the schools. This is really being treated seriously. So I'm absolutely delighted at this, because at the end of the day, I know it's just saying it, but If young people don't get jobs, if young people don't go to university, get apprenticeships, whatever their aspirations are, then the future isn't very bright. And we do see in some countries in the world, particularly in Southern Europe, the problems of youth unemployment. We don't have that, thank goodness. So I really do welcome this. And I've just finished by saying someone made the point about school attendance. It was something I always felt very strongly about as a teacher. You know, we have brought in fantastic attendance monitoring into our schools now, and I think it must be supported, because at the end of the day, if they're not in the classroom, it's very difficult for us to teach them. So thank you very much, Chief Executive, for this report.
Councillor Rimney.
Yeah, could I just follow up on what Councillor Muirhead was saying? And I apologise to him about moving up the lead from 30th to 29th. It's just a flippant remark about getting up the league table. But seriously, about tracking, I mean, the director didn't, to my mind, you spoke very clearly on our school leavers and monitoring where they're going, and Councillor Coventry talked in terms of the programme that's there. What we don't have is unless I've got it wrong, we don't track them through further education, which could be college or university, and see when they come out at the other end of that, for example, where they end up going. And to my mind, a positive destination is going through, completing your first part of education, because it's lifelong learning and we all accept that, but it's completing that first part of your education and then seeing if you're getting that positive destination. And there's a young lad that's just got a temporary contract in the Sestran office just now that went to Beeslack High, gone through university, he's got an aeronautical degree. Flipping blows you away when he talks in terms of what he's doing, as if you're supposed to understand it. But nevertheless, he can't get a job. Now you see and he's come there because at least if he gets 6 months under his belt, it helps him perhaps show that when he goes to try and achieve that fulfilment of that positive destination, then he's got something to show. But we don't track that through, from what I understand, unless I'm getting that wrong. We actually track it through to the point where people, you're going away to a further education college, or you're away to university, tick in the box, that's a positive destination. That's only part and parcel of it. And if you follow what Vic's saying, you get them at the school, you get their aspirations, you push them into either further education or university, then you make sure that when they come out the other end of that they're actually finding themselves gainful employment. And it's just that little bit I think is missing, but I may be, and I'll apologise if I've got that wrong, but I think that bit's missing unless you're covering that in the Chief Executive's report.
Can I just explain that young people are often followed up through until the age of 20? But I mean, you're quite right, Councillor Imrie, in what you're saying about, when any individual leaves school, college or university, that's the most challenging time. And the big challenge for many of the young people is that they haven't got any work experience or the confidence in the workplace, and many of them don't have the employability skills, so therefore there are programmes there to help young people. I would urge any young person to go along to their local careers office, or if they've just come out of university, to go along to the careers service within the university, where they'll be able to explain the programmes which are tailored to that individual.
Councillor De Wink.
Really, this council ought to adopt a rule that really it is our moral obligation to make sure that no school leaver ever has to sign up on the dole. I know there are lots of ways in which we can help young school leavers, but it's our moral obligation that we must make sure that every school leaver has somehow a place to go to.
Thank you. Everyone finished on that one? Thank you. We move to item number 28. Community Empowerment Bill Consultation Response Report by the Chief Executive, Kenneth Loy.
Thank you, Provost. The aim of this report is to seek approval for the attached response to the Scottish Government, which has been submitted subject to final council approval. Those of you that have perhaps taken the opportunity to look at the draft bill and the consultation guidance will be aware of the scale and the range of the proposals included in this proposed legislation, from asset transfer requests to requests from communities to participate in the delivery of public services, to defective and dangerous buildings, allotments, community right to buy, and indeed strengthen community planning. There will be new statutory obligations on public service bodies. So it is a very wide-ranging piece of legislation which is likely to come forward some 9 months from now. The draft response is, as I say, included as an appendix, and I welcome any comments which members may have.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, clearly what's included in the Community Empowerment Bill is a significant number of different aspects, some of which is around clearly the ability of communities to run their own affairs. I think that the response in general is very strong. One point I disagree on and would move an amendment actually is question 4. Do you agree that community bodies should have the right of appeal to ministers as set out in section 8? I think we should be saying yes to that, quite simply. I mean, it's established in planning terms that there's appeals to ministers. I don't see why we should be suggesting that there would be any difference in terms of this. That's not to take away from the fact that that answer then goes on to say that there could be alternatives to that. I just feel no reason why we shouldn't be supporting communities having that right of appeal to ministers. So if I could ask Council to accept that amendment, I think the rest of the response is sound.
Mr. Milligan.
Yeah, Owen, I don't immediately disagree with what you're saying, but if you're wanting to keep it in line with planning, any appeal as to a review body, if it's delegated to officers first and foremost, but if it's a decision by the council, it's to the minister. Is that what you're suggesting following, or are you just saying an appeal straight to the minister?
I was using planning as an example, as members are sort of used to systems that allow referral to ministers and what that involves. I think that the detail in section 8 of the consultation paper is pretty detailed, and if we could say, I'd see no reason why we should be objecting to saying yes to allowing community bodies to have a right of appeal to ministers. I mean, as I say, it might be that there's an intermediate process there, but ultimately I think there's nothing to say that we shouldn't be saying that bodies can appeal to a minister.
Okay. Do we accept the yes vote there? Thank you.
Secretary.